Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. I want to welcome everyone to our video about Hanukkah. Hanukkah, we're going to go through what the holiday means and what we can gain in this day and age, thousands of years later after the miracle occurred. So Hanukkah is the last known, openly revealed miracle that was done for the Jewish people, even though we also have the holiday of Purim. The holiday of Purim, if you go through the book of Esther, the entire book of Esther does not mention God's name, right? Even though we see behind the scenes how God orchestrates things and how He is running, He's running everything and is going to bring the downfall of Haman. Oops, spoiler alert, Haman dies, right? End of story. Anyway, you have to wait for Purim for that, for that video. Anyway, so Hanukkah itself, by Purim does not mention God's name. And the fact that it doesn't mention God's name doesn't mean He's not there. It's just that God is working in the background. And because He's working in the background, it's not as obvious, right? We see things that go from step to step to step, exactly how things transpire and how the Jewish people get saved. Be that as it may, in this case, we don't see it direct. We don't see God's influence directly involved in the saving of the Jewish people, even though if we see what's going on in background and we see step after step, we see God's there the entire time. It's more hidden. Hanukkah is an open miracle, right? One open miracle is that the Maccabees fight against the Greek army, and the Greeks at that time were the world power, and they trained in war and in warfare, and these ragtag bunch of yeshiva students drove them out of the land. So that was one miracle, which we'll go through a little bit. And also, when they came into the temple, even though the Greeks defiled certain things in the temple, they found a pach shemen, they found a crucible of oil with the signet of the Kohen Gadol, of the high priest, and that oil was only supposed to last for 1 day, and it ended up lasting 8 days. So for that reason, each night when we light the menorah, you light the leftist most candle, and then you light from left to right. So on the 8th night, for example, you'll get to the end of the menorah, right? You light here, let's say to the left is the menorah. So you light to the left, you make the blessing, you light the first candle, and then you go from right to left, right? Why? Because each night, the miracle candle is the first one that's lit. So therefore, on the second night, you light the second candle first, and then you go from right to left. Third night, third candle. Fourth night, fourth candle. Fifth, right? So you go all the way through. It's been too many latkes, too much oil, gone straight to the brain. Anyway, so that's the miracle of the oil, and that's the miracle fighting against the Greeks. So the question really is, so what's this all about? Is it about a military victory? Is it just about the oil? And even if it is a military victory, how could a few thousand yeshiva students never trained in warfare, how can they go to war against the Greeks and think they're going to win? Not only that, what if they died? What if they got massacred? Right? If they got massacred, would that have been called suicide? Right? So these things have to be understood. In the Al Nisim prayer, Al Nisim talks about the miracles we say in the Shemona Esrei, in the silent meditation. We say 3 times a day. For all you men out there who pray 3 times a day, or for women at least twice a day, or once a day, right? In the morning, afternoon, and night, in the middle of Shemona Esrei, we read this paragraph about the miracles of Hanukkah. So one thing that we say there is that we say at the beginning that days the Hasmoneans, Mattathias ben Yochanan, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, and the sons of a wicked Hellenic government rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and transgress the laws of your will. So first of all, the Hellenic government, right? The Greeks are called wicked. Why are they called wicked? Or if you're in Boston, they're wicked. They're wicked. Right? So that why they called that? They're called that because they made decrees against the Jewish people. They didn't allow them to do circumcision, to do bris milah. They didn't want them to keep Shabbos, and they didn't want them to do Rosh Chodesh. Right? Rosh Chodesh meaning the new months. So they wouldn't have a Jewish calendar. But what the Greeks did was nothing compared to what Haman wanted to do. Haman wanted to destroy the entire Jewish people, kill every one of them. So on Purim, we have a festive meal, and we drink because that's where the miracle came through. It came from this meal that Esther invited Haman to. So you have this big festive meal because it's a day of great joy because we got saved from annihilation. Now here wasn't the same thing. Right? It's a day to be happy. These are days to be happy. We're not allowed to be sad. You don't fast. You don't give eulogies during Hanukkah. It's a time of joy. Joy doesn't mean feasting, though. But if you have a festive meal, let's say, you eat a nice meal and you tell over the miracles, that makes the meal into a mitzvah, makes it into a Sudas mitzvah. But it's not the same as having a meal on Purim. Right, a meal in Purim, you have, 3 hors d'oeuvres, 4 courses, and, hopefully you remember something after the end of the meal. Right, it's a whole different thing. But we mentioned before, isn't it true that the Greeks wanted to uproot religion? Sort of. They made decrees, right? That's clear. Bris milah, circumcision, Rosh Chodesh. They made decrees against the Jews. But they didn't want to annihilate the Jews. What did they want them to do? They wanted the Jews to be like them, to be like the Greeks. And therefore, you wanted to be a Jew at home, as Moses Mendelssohn said, be a Jew at home, don't be a Jew outside. Right? You want to keep the holidays and you want to keep kosher and do things in your house? Good. You do that in your house. When you go outside, you be like everybody else. Right? You look like everybody else. Right? Sounds like what the anti-Semites say. Right? They're different. They don't eat the same thing as you. Right? It's what Haman said. They don't, they won't eat your food. They won't go to your sporting events. They're different. Let's wipe them out. But isn't what self-hating Jews say the same thing? Self-hating Jews say, yeah, don't be different. If you're too different than the non-Jews, they're going to hate you more. Well, we saw what happened in Germany when we tried to be, more German than the Germans themselves, right? We got annihilated, right, all over Europe. Assimilation doesn't bring us closer to non-Jews. Just the opposite. The more you want to be like a non-Jew, the more they're going to hate you, right? But that's not 100% the topic here. What are we talking about? We're talking about the idea that the Greeks wanted the Jews to forget Torah. Now, forgetting Torah is not putting a gun to their head and saying, Jew, do this or you're going to die. Right? That was the Inquisition. That were other times. Wasn't the time during the Greeks. The Greeks, what did they want? They wanted you to be like them. Come to their gymnasiums. Come to their schools. Hang out with them. Intermarry with them. Like, what's the problem? You want to be Jewish? So, all right, so you keep a little bit of Jewishness. And the rest you'll be like us. So that we've seen throughout the centuries, right? In more modern history, we've seen that will lead to a 70% intermarriage rate. That will lead to the vast majority of Jews not knowing anything about their own religion, which is a recipe for disaster. Because the only thing that keeps the Jews together is Torah, right? We've seen that throughout history. You want to make a Jewish state without Judaism? It's not going to survive, right? The only reason Judaism survives in any way, shape, or form is because there's a Torah. You can't have a body without a soul. I mean, you could, it'll die, right? Secular Zionism is dead, right? It does, the only true secular Zionists you find, that are left today, are the cab drivers in Israel. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the connection is between being a cab driver and a secular Zionist. Be that as it may, they're the true last Zionists, right? There aren't any true Zionists really anymore. That ideal has gone out the window. Why? Because it can't be passed down. People don't want it. They just want to, be free and do whatever, but they don't want to have any problems. So these secular Zionists are pretty much have almost, disappeared. So the Greeks say, be like us. So, when the Jews were in America, and they came to America, so the conservative movement, that was their thing, to be part of the secular world, and to bring Judaism, up to speed, to make it for the modern man. Now, what happens when you do that? So we've seen the result, right? The result is tremendous amount of assimilation, and the result is that you're going to have intermarriage, right? Very high intermarriage rate. So at the end of the day, you want to become more modern. Okay, if this fits, I'll do it. If it doesn't fit, I won't do it. If it makes sense, fine. If not, we'll chuck it. So what happens? They chuck a good amount of Torah. They give minimal amount of education to their kids. And their kids give even less than that to their kids. So it's a recipe for disaster. Says the Ramban. Nachmanides says, what was the threat? What was the real threat of the Greeks? What did they bring to the table? What did they bring to the world? So the Talmud says, when you look at the Greeks, we look at them as living in darkness. You're going to say, Greeks? Darkness? Look at all the architecture, or some of it that we have left from them. Look at what they've done for the world and education, etc. We live in a Greek world. You say, what's the connection? These people have been dead for thousands of years. There is no Greek culture, so to speak, from that era. Well, you're right. You got the Parthenon. You got some other places around that have this sculpture or whatever. But at the same time, the Greeks themselves are gone. But what did they leave in their wake? They left what we have today. Right? Education, other things that the Greeks brought are what we are a part of. So be that as it may, why does the Talmud call that darkness? We know that, or if you don't know, again, bring up another fact here, that the Torah was allowed to be translated into Greek. Right? Greek had the Greeks had a beautiful language. So there are certain things we gain. We gain from them. But at the same time, we look at them as being in darkness. Now, darkness, the Ramban says, why is it so bad? Because Aristotle came along, and he said, I want to bring this idea to the world. The idea was that if I can't fathom something, and I don't understand it, what my brain capacity can understand, then it must not exist. And therefore, I don't have to give it any, value. So they brought this idea, if I can't explain it, if I can't understand it, so to speak, then I don't have to do it. Well, isn't that what the conservative movement says? We don't understand the thing called shatnez. Shatnez means I can't wear a sweater. It's mixed with wool and linen. I have to get a check to see if there is linen in it or whatever. We don't understand, right? It's a chok. It's something that, like the red heifer, makes someone impure at the same time making them pure. Something that doesn't make logical sense, right? Doesn't mean we don't have to try and understand it, to the best of our ability. At the same time, you still have to keep it, right? So the law, every community should have people that know how to check for this. Suits, sweaters, whatever it is, that might have this mixture of wool and linen. So why do we keep it? Because the Torah says so. What's the reason behind it? Not sure. Does that mean it's not valid? It just means, we don't have brain capacity. There's certain things we can't fathom. King Solomon was the wisest of all men. And King Solomon didn't understand fully this idea of the paraduma, of the red heifer. Be that as it may, in this case, so there are mitzvahs you still have to do, even if we don't fully understand it. Now, when we come to a recognition that God commands us, and we have an obligation as Jews to keep the Torah, it's not a 5-year option to renew. It's not like, you feel like doing it, fine. If not. It's not like the Jews ate the same, they all ate the same hallucinogenic mushroom in the desert, and that's where the Torah came from, because that's not what the Torah says. Right? The Torah says God gave the Torah to Jewish people, and there was fire and brimstone, and, people died, came back to life. It was an unbelievable experience. So, the idea is that even if we don't fully understand it, we still have to our best of our ability, to try and understand it. Now, that being true, now this is the danger. This is the danger of the Greeks. Comes along Aristotle, or as the Ramban calls him, and in literature he's called Aristo, right? Says Aristo that if I can't understand it, I can't fathom it in my brain, then, why do I have to keep it? Why would I have to do it? So there's an answer to Aristotle. The answer to Aristotle is, what about atoms? Do we see atoms? No. But we know they exist. So you might say, well, under a microscope, this, that. At face value, do we see them? No. DNA, do we know what it looks like? Today we do. Did we know before? I had an idea, but not exactly. But we knew it existed. And we knew what it did. Because I don't see it, or I don't fathom it 100%, does it make it any less likely that it didn't happen? No. So Aristotle says, if I can't understand it, or I can't fathom it, then that's it. I don't have to do it. So, what is he telling you? He's telling you that there's an idea, I am bigger than God. Meaning that my IQ, whether it's 150, 120, or whether it's 220, right? I make God in my image. If I don't understand it, I just chuck it. It's not God. Right? Or I'm just as knowledgeable. But that's further from the truth. Right? Just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. What gets in the way? 3 very big letters. E-G-O. In the vernacular, that's called ego. Greeks had a big ego. Oh, I don't understand it. It's God's world? No. If I don't understand it, I don't understand it. I don't have to do it. I don't have any obligations. Comes along the Ramban and says that's destruction. Why is it destruction? Oh, it's obvious. Because just because I don't fathom it, or I can't get to the bottom of it, and I'm not sure what it means 100%, doesn't mean it's less valid. If you go to the beginning of the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides, the Rambam says God is absolute. If God is absolute, that means he doesn't change. That means laws don't change. That means they're universal for all times. If they do change, what does that mean? It means that I can do whatever I want. There's nothing binding me. Because in reality, if it's not absolute, it changes because of time. Right? Haven't we heard that before? Judaism has to be accustomed to the times. So let me ask you, what does that mean? What does that mean? It means just whatever I don't understand, get rid of. It means make it more, make it more understandable, so to speak, make it, better, easier, you fill in the blank, and that will continue Judaism to the next generation. That would be great if it worked. But you see, these other movements count women, do other things, and still doesn't bring people to want to be more religious Jews. It just waters it down. And when you water it down, what's the result? 70% intermarriage rate, right? That's what the Greeks wanted. Because they don't need to stick a gun or sword or whatever to a person's head and say, do this or I'm going to kill you. We're doing it to ourselves. That's what they, if we're like them and we're part of them and we go to their gymnasiums and all this, then there's very little for Judaism to survive. So that's the danger. The danger being that the Greeks brought this idea of either I understand it or I don't. So there's a parable. The Maggid of Dubno brings a parable why this can't work. And the parable is that a king walks into the forest and he sees an arrow shot into a bullseye on trees, like one after the other. So he's like, wow, I have to get this great marksman to show my men how to shoot. So what does he do? He finds this marksman, and he asks the marksman, can you tell me, can you teach my men how to shoot? So he says, yeah, it's very simple. It doesn't take any brains at all over here. I take an arrow and I shoot it in the air. If it hits a tree, I draw a bullseye around it. Right? So what's that bullseye? What's the parable? The bullseye is morality. Changes from one to the next. Meaning what would have been totally forbidden years ago, today now becomes a mitzvah. Why? Because times have changed. See, but the Rambam says, okay, times may have changed. Torah doesn't change. Torah just has to be understood in context. So people will say, okay, Torah's changed because we don't live in an agricultural society. True. We don't live in an agricultural society anymore. So when it comes to the laws of electricity, if a person turns on a light on Shabbos, is that like making a fire, right? It's one of the 39 categories mentioned explicitly in the Torah. You're not allowed to kindle a fire on Shabbos. Torah says, oh, electricity doesn't mean anything. I just flick a switch, right? It's not work, quote unquote. I just flick a switch, so what? It's not doing anything. Really? No current, no, whatever, who cares how it works? I'm just flicking the switch, it's not doing anything. Right, it doesn't do anything. Okay, let's take apart the light socket. Here's the screwdriver. Go stick it in the light socket. It's not doing anything. They said, no, what are you kidding? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get electrocuted. But you just told me you're not doing anything. It doesn't do anything. So the question is electricity like fire? If I take a stove, right, electric stove or a gas stove, is that like fire? Well, gas is more like fire because it looks like fire. What about an electric stove? I don't know. Maybe it's not the same. Maybe using an electric stove on Shabbos is permissible. So you say, well, let's do a test. Here's fire. This is what fire does. It burns. Let's see if this electric thing burns. Stick your hand over fire and see if your hand burns. Stick your hand over the electric thing, see if your hand burns. If they both do the same thing, well, guess what? Then it's going to be forbidden. The only question is, what category does it come under? So people say, oh, look, you're changing the Torah. The Torah's changing. No, it's not. The Torah says you're not allowed to make a fire. We're now trying to determine, does using an electric oven or a microwave or anything like that, is that like fire or not? That's not changing Torah. That's understanding if this is like that or it's not like that. That's why you have rabbinical authorities in every generation to decide that. So if it is, it's forbidden. If it's not, it'd be permissible. Answer, it's forbidden. We hold it's forbidden. It just depends what category it comes down to. So in this case, we have to understand how this all fits together. If I can do what I want, and everything's relative, right? The parable that we gave. If everything is relative, then it changes. If it changes, it's not absolute. If it's not absolute, then it can't be God. Because you have one choice. Sorry, you have two choices. Either you believe in God and it's absolute, or you believe in idolatry. You say, you're a fanatic. Thank you very much. What do you mean? How can you say it's one way or the other? The answer is because if I don't believe in God, what do I believe in? If I believe in things that are relative change. If I give power to something through change like that, that takes God out of the picture. That's idolatry. Now, idolatry doesn't mean bowing down to something. It could, right? That's a literal translation. You're bowing down to something. Or you're giving something power that it shouldn't have. I bow down to the wind, right? Well, fire is stronger than, wind. You say, all right, I bow down to water. Then you say, something else takes place of water, whatever. These things have power. But we mentioned before, it only has power because God wills it. Right? The ocean can't decide they, wants to make a tsunami, destroy half of Southeast Asia because it feels like doing it. If God wills it, fine. If not, not. So there's an idea of things being absolute and they don't change. And the Greeks say there is no absolute. Right? It's what I understand. What I understand isn't absolute. It's finite. That's the danger. Because when you start spewing that, and you use that as a philosophy, it doesn't obligate you to do things. If everything is relative, and that's what moral relativism is, you're okay, I'm okay, you do what you do, don't interfere with what I do. Fine. But what has that brought to the Jewish world? Has that brought anything good to the Jewish world? Doesn't seem like it. Because what that does, it just breaks down a person's belief in God. And it makes it so weak that they don't keep it, they don't do anything, or they do very little. What does that lead to? 70% intermarriage rate. Right? Next stop, assimilation. You use your Hebrew name, right, 3 or 4 times during your lifetime. When you're born, you get the name. When you're bar bat mitzvah, you use it. When you get married and when you die. 4 times. Is that what God wants? Is that going to be, what we're gonna hold on to, that Torah is going to survive? No. So this is all part of the Greek mindset. Totally 100% not good for Jews, and certainly not good for the Jewish people. That's why in the Al Hanisim, about the miracles, it says this wicked government is going to make them forget Torah, and they're going to make you go against God's will. That's an amazing thing, because if they cause me to do that, what it's going to do is it's going to cause me more to forget Torah. If I forget Torah and I don't keep it and I don't pass it down, it's going to cause God's ire. Right? There's no mitzvah to be ignorant. Right? I'm always fond of saying there's a 614th commandment, don't be stupid. 615th, is don't be ignorant. You have to learn. Torah needs to be passed down. If you go in that direction, Torah will be forgotten. And Torah will disappear. So we talk about moral relativism. Years ago, let's say my grandparents' generation, if you would have said, the Jewish people are going to disappear, they would say, no, we got to do something, Jewish people can't disappear. Now they say, okay, so they'll disappear. It was a nice run, a couple thousand years. Okay, so there won't be any Jews left. What's the big deal? That's moral relativism. That means you're going according to what goes on in your time, and you forget the timeless message. So the Greeks subtly, again, not by bashing you over the head, you being more like them, i.e. you Jew being more like a Greek, causes you 100% or will cause you to forget Torah. When you forget Torah, what do we say? You're going to transgress God's law. God doesn't want that. He's given you free will. You can make your choice. But he doesn't want that. He doesn't want his law forgotten. Right? One aspect of what the Greeks brought to the world. So then it continues, and it says, God stood by us in time of distress. You defended their rights. You avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong in the hands of the weak, the many in the hands of the few. What does it mean, the strong in the hands of the weak? Right? Simple explanation is you had these ragtag yeshiva students, so to speak, did not fight, weren't versed in war, went to fight against the mighty Greek army. Now, why are they allowed to do so? You can say they got so mad, they brought a pig onto the altar. They said, we can't take it anymore. We got to get these Greeks out of here. Excuse me. You're fighting against the most powerful army that exists, that is trained in warfare. You know nothing about warfare. 1,000, 10,000, going against, 1,000,000, you're never going to win. Not only are you never going to win, you're going to get slaughtered. Because you're not trained in warfare. So, what are you thinking? Why is this allowed? Why is this not called suicide? So I heard an interesting thing recently about the fact that the Torah doesn't mention explicitly the world to come. Torah hints different places about the world to come, but doesn't say explicitly the world to come. Why not? Because if we were doing things, if we would do mitzvahs today, because we want a portion of the world to come, is that a positive thing or a negative thing? We believe that we're going to get rewarded for our mitzvahs. But no one's saying, I can't wait, I'm going to get this reward in the next world, and it's going to be so great, that's why I'm going to keep the mitzvahs. My Rebbe's always said, I've never met anyone in that world who's been there and come back. So we don't know what that is. We can't imagine what that is. Doesn't matter, you still have to do what you have to do. You still have to keep the Torah, you still have to keep the mitzvahs. True. But see, we're not thinking in the front of our mind or even the back of our mind, I'm keeping this because look at the great reward I'm going to get. Yeah, we understand that. But the point we're doing is because we believe it's the right thing to do. We believe it's the absolute will of God. That's why someone who wants to convert to Judaism, that's where they have to be holding. Right? They have to say that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people. And because he gave the Torah to the Jewish people, then that he gave it to Moses. Moses passed it down. And because my soul somehow got messed up on Mount Sinai, means I have to reconnect it. How do I reconnect it? I have to go through conversion. But they're going through conversion because they believe it's the absolute will of God. Nothing short. If it's anything less than that, they won't be converted. So if that's true, then they had a conviction. The conviction was that, the Greeks, they're well versed in war. They certainly know what they're doing. And we need to get rid of them. We don't know anything about warfare. So how can we be thrown into the lion's den and expect to win? Because we believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that God is going to be with us. Now, if we look at the idea, just backtrack 1 second, we look at the idea of the world to come, right? We're keeping the mitzvahs because we believe it's the right thing to do. If you look at, let's say, the Arabs today, their mitzvahs that they do, or they think they do, by killing people is going to bring them into the world to come. Crusaders thought that. Christians think that, by killing more Jews or whatever, right, throughout the millennia, they thought, I'm going to get, first place seats in the world to come. So that's why the Torah doesn't speak about it. Because we're doing mitzvahs because we believe it's the right thing to do. You tell me you're going to get a portion of the world to come, fine, but that's not the main reason why I'm keeping the mitzvahs. I'm keeping it because I believe it's the ultimate will of God. And even if, God forbid, someone once told me, they said, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. I said, I hope for your sake you're right. Because if you're wrong and I'm right, you better start repenting now because you're in big trouble. But we have free will. We can do what we want. We make our own decisions. At the same time, if we're doing things because it's the will of God, you're not going to kill people. You're going to be driven to do these things. That's why it's more positive. Right? If you're only doing things because, I believe I'm going to, a person believes they're going to get all this, whatever it is in the next world because you kill and maim and do all these things. You sanctify, that God's name by doing all that. So that's what's going to happen. But you see, people who do that and live for that, what happens? It's out of violence. It's not out of, being close to that God. It's out of killing. Judaism doesn't hold of that. That's why it's not mentioned, because we're doing positive things, not negative. So I mentioned that because when we talk about the Maccabees going against the Greeks, they weren't doing it to sanctify God's name. That would have been forbidden. Right? That's suicide. We don't believe in suicide. Someone will commit suicide if they ultimately commit suicide. You don't mourn for them. If it's shown it was done, for suicide. Because they don't have a right to take their own life. You don't have a right to put yourself in a dangerous situation. If you do, you could be held liable. If it's a doubt whether it's a dangerous situation, it's one thing. If you know for sure it's dangerous, you're not allowed to do that. So in this case, is it a suicide mission? No. Are they saying we're going to sanctify God's name and end up, in paradise because of it? No. They're doing it for the sake of heaven. Regardless of what's going to happen, they believe God's going to protect them. Might say it's foolhardy, whatever. But they believe beyond the shadow of a doubt that God would take care of them. He didn't want his own house, quote unquote, desecrated. And he's going to give them the strength to overcome them. That's not suicide. Again, you might call it wishful thinking. They're not relying on a miracle here. They believe 100% God's going to take care of them. So if you have that belief, God should take care of you. If you're on that level. And they were. Problem is, what happens? This also has to be a little bit explained. What happens is, they're successful. They drive out the Greeks. And they take power for 200 years. Now, Talmud says, anyone who says they come from the house of the Hoshmanaim, of the Maccabees, they're a slave. What do you mean they're a slave? They're very righteous people. Tremendously righteous people. Had this open miracle done for them. So, there's no remembrance of the Hasmoneans whatsoever. It's strange. Look at what they did. Look at what the power that they had, that they were allowed to do. They're wiped off the face of the map. There's no recollection of them except for this. And if you say in future generations, you come from that kingdom, from that tribe, from the Maccabees, not from the tribe, but from their lineage, you're a slave. Why the punishment? Why is there such great punishment? That they're totally demolished. They're in power for 200 years. Were they allowed to take power? They come from the Davidic line? They come from the tribe of Judah, of Yehuda? No. They took power from themselves to bring people back to Tshuva, etc. They had reasons for doing what they did. So God says, I'll give you the reward of driving out the Greeks. But you did that against my will. Because you did that against my will, then you're going to be wiped off the face of the map. So it's a little bit hard to understand. But they went too far. Even though they did it for the sake of heaven, they should not have taken power. There were guidelines. What you're allowed to do. In this part they were successful, in that part they failed, and it's taken away from them. So that's the idea. That's the idea of the Maccabees. I just want to hit a few other things here. And it says, the strong in the hands of the weak, many in the hands of the few, impure in the hands of the pure. What does it mean, the many in the hands of the few? Right? We already understand that, right? That seems pretty obvious. So the answer is that non-Jews will say to the Jews, listen, your Torah says you have to go after the majority. So we're the majority. Non-Jewish world is the majority. So you should be keeping our laws. Why are you keeping these antiquated laws? Don't make a whole lot of sense. So what do the Jews answer? The Jews say that when do we go according to the majority? The Torah says, Book of Exodus, the Torah says, Acharei Rabim Lahatos. You go after the majority. What does it mean you go after the majority? You only go after the majority when you have a doubt. In other words, you have 3 pieces of meat, one is not kosher, but 2 out of 3 are. I can eat them. Go after the majority. Rabbinical court, you have 2 rabbis against 1, you go after the majority. For good, not for bad. Right, but the reason you go after the majority in these cases, this is what you answer. The reason you go after the majority is very simple. Because you have a doubt. If there's a doubt, I can rely on this concept. So the Jews say to the non-Jews, you know what? That's only if you have a doubt. But I don't have a doubt over here. We believe 100% the Torah is absolute. We believe 100% the Torah is true. If the Torah is true and the Torah is absolute, there is no doubt. Goodbye. So we go after the majority only if there's a doubt, not in this case. One other idea. It says after that, the pure into the hands of the impure, into the hands of the pure. Right? There are people that defiled, the non-Jews defiled the altar. And the Jews came, got rid of them, and got this crucible of oil. So, it's a famous story with the Baal Tanya. Baal Tanya wrote the Lubavitcher Rebbe who wrote the Sefer Tanya, had a student, and he warned the student about going to university, about bad influences in university. So the student said, yeah, but, Rebbe, I stayed by you for many years, I didn't become so righteous, I didn't become such a tzaddik. If I go to university, I'm not going to become so bad. So the Baal Tanya said, yeah, that may be true. To be righteous is a hard thing, right? To be righteous, you really have to work. And, it's not an easy thing. You want to become impure? Impure is only by touching. Once you touch it, you already become impure. Right? Many cases like that. So, you want to go to university? Impurity sticks you like glue. You want to become pure? That takes work. So we're getting a little bit of a picture, right, of what Hanukkah wants to, or seems that it should, should have this, this deeper meaning. Keep in mind, you light the candles. The candles are not a little trinket from, December 25th. There's no connection, even though sometimes it comes out around that time. It has absolutely no connection whatsoever. Hanukkah is about light. What is light? Right? Light, we say, ner mitzvah, v'torah or. Ner, candle, is compared to a mitzvah. Or, light, is compared to Torah. So when you light the lights, and you make the blessing, right? God commanded me to do this. This is what my forefathers did. Just like my forefathers did. And we pass that down. What light are you passing down? Oh, it's a nice little trinket. Nice colored candles and very nice. Make the blessing, eat a few latkes, potato pancakes, stuff your face with, jelly donuts or whatever. Great. Is that what the holiday's about? No. Right? It's only about Torah. Right? The power of Torah. So as we say, a little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. So we said at the beginning, darkness by the Greeks is a strange thing because, they were so advanced and so modern and Renaissance and, etc. Right? But they're limited. Only by what their brain tells them, what their brain understands. Torah, on the other hand, is limitless. So when you light the candles and you hang around the candles for a little bit, watching them flicker, and you look at this pure light, what do we think about? Donuts! No, just kidding. What do we think about? We think about the power of Torah. We think about how the Jewish people have survived throughout the generations only through Torah. It hasn't been by might. Been dispersed throughout all the nations and somehow survived. Only one reason, because of Torah. If Torah is make-believe, Torah is a 5-year, God forbid, is a 5-year option to renew, it doesn't stick. It won't stick. Statistics prove it. We're looking at a world where almost 13 million Jews know nothing about their own religion. 1 million practice a different religion altogether. The rest have assimilated. Many are unaffiliated, have no connection. This is the result of living in a Greek world as a Greek. You can say, what? I'm a Greek? Yeah. What's the most important thing for a Jew? Is his connection to God. Is doing what God wants us to do. That connection is priceless. Has to be worked on. You get too close, you can get burned. Be that as it may. We have to strive. We have to have the ratzon. We have to have the desire. We want to get there. We may fail. We may get knocked down. We have to pick ourselves up. We have to become better. Because if we live with this Greek mentality, we die with assimilation. And that, in the last 50, 60 years has destroyed the Jewish people more than any army could do trying to destroy us physically. Spiritually, it's a disaster. Thank God that, Orthodox yeshivas are growing. Orthodoxy is growing. Everything else is dead. Not dying, dead. This is the result. It gets so bad where the most important question a person may ask in their lifetime is if I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog. And they're thinking, ketchup, mustard. And someone says, what about relish? Relish, ketchup, mustard, all these different things. You're going to say, is it that shallow? Are people really that shallow? Unfortunately, yes. Kind of like trying to start a Jeep with a 9-volt. This is what the Greeks have brought. So when you light that candle, when you eat that potato pancake, and you say, Greeks, I'm doing this against you, because you're no longer around. The Torah is eternal. Torah doesn't change. If it did change, we see what the result is. The fact that it doesn't change is what's kept the Jewish people together. So when that light flickers, and you watch it for any amount of time, remember what the message is. The message is, as we say when we put away the Torah, when the Torah is taken out 3 times a week, right? Monday, Thursday, and on Shabbos, we say, Eitz Chaim hi lemachzikim ba. Torah is a tree of life to those that grab it. Right? Lemachzik means you're not grabbing it per se, it's grabbing you. So it's not how much I put myself into Torah, it's how much the Torah puts into me. The word machzik is in grammar, Hebrew grammar, is hefil, it's causative. It's not active, I'm not grabbing, it's grabbing me. So if I put all my effort in, the Torah is going to grab me, it's going to change me. The reason it's going to change me is because I take its teaching seriously. As Rav Moshe Snyder, may his name be blessed, said, don't be a frummer student. Don't learn Torah like mathematics. It's not mathematics. It's not another discipline. It's life. Right? The Chofetz Chaim, may his name be blessed, said, we don't say time is money. Right? Maybe that's an American linguistic idea. He said Torah is life. Learning is life. Observance is life. Not even talking about the next world right now. What does it do for me right now? It should change the person. Enough latkes, it will. Won't be able to move for a few days. Right? It changes the person. If it doesn't, then you're an autopilot. Autopilot is bad. Right? You have to keep growing and go and go and go and build and build and build and build. Because knowledge is power. Knowledge has the ability to change. So, you might say, well, how do I get that? How do I get these building blocks? You start from the beginning. You learn a little bit. And then you learn a little bit more. Torah never goes to waste. If I learn something here, or I learn something over there, it eventually is all going to come back full circle. You might say, how do you know that? Because I've seen it. So we have 8 days, or 7 days now, left. Hanukkah is sort of the intermediate time, or the time between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover. Right, sort of like right in the middle. Got about 4 months or so towards Passover. Right, many Jewish women probably getting nervous a little bit. Passover, ooh, gotta start cleaning soon. Right, we got time. I mean, obviously, got a plan for that, but we have time. It's a time of introspection. It's a time to see if what I took on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where I'm holding right now. And if I'm not holding where I need to be, better start, changing that. See if we can make a positive, upswing on the way to Passover. Anyone interested, I also give conversion classes and classes to Noahides. You can take a look at my Facebook page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, or Beyond Noahides. I have a blog. Some people have actually found it. It's called rabbichaimkaufman.blogspot.com, RABBIChaimKaufman.blogspot.com. Everyone should have a nice, enjoyable Hanukkah, and go easy on those donuts and latkes.